Hi, I'm Amy Arwoodmark, and I'm here at MMZ Jazz Day 3. This video is actually being recorded earlier in the day before I attend the final sessions of the conference. Just wanted to make sure I get this video out to you before I have to head back home to really cold Chicago. Although, fun fact, it's actually pretty cold here too, so we're all a little bit surprised. I don't think very many of us packed for how cold it actually is, so it's been a fun week kind of dealing with that when you go to a conference expecting to be warm and you end up being cold. But the organizers are doing a good job of keeping the attendees warm in the rooms, which is kind of a nice problem because typically they're keeping the attendees quite cool. So very interesting. Anyhow, it is the last day. If you weren't able to attend, you can still see what sessions were presented and look up who those speakers are, comb through their blogs, and get a general idea of some of the topics that they're talking about. I wanted to point out that there is a cool guy on Twitter. He happens to live pretty close to me, and when you live in the country, pretty close is about maybe 30 miles or so. So he lives within a 30-mile radius of me, which makes him basically a neighbor, and that is Andrew Johnson. He is also a co-founder of our user group that we used to hold in Naperville, Illinois, and then we moved online because Johan and I moved rather far away from civilization. Anyhow, Andrew has put together a script that allows you to attach to the MMS Sketch website, and you can download the PowerPoints and scripts that the speakers upload to the sessions. I'm not sure if you have to be signed in, so this might be just a resource for attendees, but if you know someone who went to the conference, maybe they can download those decks and scripts for you. Otherwise, if you're able to download it yourself, that's awesome. I still recommend that you comb through who the speakers are and really get to know who they are and the stuff that they typically tweet and blog about, because then you'll be able to fill in the blanks of the stuff that you missed when you weren't in the room. So here is Andrew's Twitter profile, and his pinned tweet is for the MMS downloader, so that's pretty awesome. There were a ton of OSD sessions in this conference, so don't think that OSD is dead. I feel like Microsoft is kind of giving us more of a nice bridge to walk across rather than the original message of stop doing OS deployment, start using Autopilot. If you're doing anything else, you're doing it wrong. I think Microsoft has kind of taken a step back and listened to us to understand that that's a really big jump that you're asking us to make, and I think that a lot of us do want to move forward in a different direction and maybe not do the same repetitive things over and over again. Obviously, everyone's custom image is custom to their environment, so there is a lot of thought and detail that has to go into that, and Microsoft is trying to simplify some of that for us, and I think that we should allow Microsoft to take away some of the repetitiveness of OSD, but they are still allowing us to do customization. So something that I wanted to point out is a blog post that Michael Niehaus wrote earlier in the year about customizations that you can do for Windows Autopilot devices. So if you caught the video that I did with Michael Nystrom last night, we talked about how Microsoft announced at Ignite just last week that you can now, you will be able to very soon turn on a device deployed by Windows Autopilot, and when it logs in, or when it powers up and runs through the UBI process, at the end it installs the Intune agent, which installs the config manager agent, and if you specify a task sequence ID, then it immediately runs a task sequence to continue customization, which is really shiny. But let's say you don't want to use that scenario, but you still do want to customize Autopilot devices. Well, Michael Niehaus has a blog post on how to do that, and I have it pulled up here on my screen. He links to the project on GitHub, but it's really cool. You can do things such as customizing the start menu layout, you can configure a background image, you can set the time zone, remove inbox apps, you can do an updated OneDrive client, and you can disable the Microsoft Edge desktop icon. If there are other things that you want to be able to do outside of this, then you can contact him. He has linked his email, which I think is very generous, and you can also just tweet him. I know that he is very active on Twitter. You can also make the request through GitHub by submitting a new issue. One of the things that I wanted to point out about this is the ability to update the OneDrive client, and this is something that I see in customer environments all the time, is that the OneDrive client gets stuck in update mode, so it kind of wreaks a little bit of havoc on other DO jobs and kind of slows things down. So I typically end up killing the OneDrive client setup and updater and wait a few days and allow it to download and update again, and then things are fine. But it's really annoying, and I wish that the OneDrive team would fix it. But until then, I do recommend that when you do deploy devices that you make sure that the OneDrive client is as up to date as possible. And moving on, one of the things that I've been engaging with attendees about this week, and I think that it kind of got a lot of attention because the MVP Summit registration opened up yesterday. So all the MVPs at the conference kind of panicked at 2 o'clock when we were able to register. But I was asked by a few attendees, how do you become an MVP? So I wanted to touch on that a little bit and talk a little bit about my journey. Everybody's journey is a little bit different, but if you love sharing, then you're already on the right step. I do want to say that you don't have to be somebody who is very good at scripting or coding or programming, any of that, or you don't have to know the absolute ins and outs of how Config Manager works or really obscure things about Microsoft products. It is really helpful, I think, if you know something that most people don't, and you're able to present it in a way that's informational and educational, and you don't just come across as someone who, hey, look at this stuff that I know that's of absolutely no value to people that might be reading my blog. But just be willing to share what you know. So if you are doing cool things in your environment, or if you are solving problems that took you hours or days to solve, and you are allowed to share what you're working on, you can certainly not call your company by name. You could call it Super Special Shoe Store, or one of the attendees calls his company Big Bank. When I worked for the government, I just said, hey, I work for the government and this is the stuff that we're doing. And obviously there are tons of different branches and offices in the government, so it's really easy to obscure really who you work for, and you don't have to give too much detail about that in case you're worried. But I would say the stuff that you're doing every day is of value to the community, because we all struggle with a lot of the same problems, and I often find that Twitter is one of the best places to come to find information. So with that being said, I think that you should blog as much as possible, even if they're just short, hey, these are the 3 steps that I took to solve this problem, see you next time. Or you could do very detailed blogs if you wanted to give a backstory and information on how you solved it and how things look going forward. Your writing style is your writing style. As long as you're solving a problem for people, I think that it'll be well received in the community. And I do recommend being active on Twitter. Someone asked, hey, I do want to be active on Twitter, but I'm afraid I'm not going to know the answer if people ask me a question. Well, a lot of you have been following me for a long time, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that I don't really have all the answers, and it's something that I'm willing to admit. I do not know everything that there is to know about Config Manager. I haven't been doing this as long as a lot of the other MVPs. Sometimes I question, should I even be doing this, which I think we all do, but the point that I want to get across is it's okay to not know the answers. I think what's more valuable to the community is if somebody asks a question directly to you and you don't know the answer, there are a lot of ways that you can handle it. You can search for a blog post that might answer the question. You can tweet other people to join the conversation because they might know the answer. I often do that with OSD questions that I get. I will loop in Johan or Michael or Jürgen Nielsen. He's been super helpful. There have been a couple times when I've asked my friend Jan to help as well. So I just wanted to really encourage people to stay active in the community. And then as you start to develop comfortability in being in the community, then you can look for speaking opportunities. So there are a lot of large towns that have user groups. They might not be specific to Config Manager or Intune or Windows 10 deployment. They might be broad Windows groups, but that might be a good place to start. You might get a lot more consumer-based audience in user groups like that, but it's a good place to start practicing. Johan and I have a user group that is 100% online, and we do this because we want to grow a large community where we're sharing information and give not only speaking opportunities to people around the world, but also attendance opportunities to people around the world. So we try to pick a good time once a month where we can hit the most time zones and get speakers in who are able to be really flexible with their schedules. Sometimes when we bring people from Europe into the user group, it's 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night for them, so it is a little bit late on the other side of the ocean, and it's earlier in the day over here, and I know that sometimes we are excluding other continents, and I'm very sorry for that, but I think that that is a good point to make, that there is still quite a large region to cover that my own online user group isn't able to cover, so I do encourage you to check that out. It also reduces the cost of having a user group so that you don't have to worry about getting sponsors, which is something that I'm very allergic to, because I want to make sure that the content is for the community and not content that's kind of paid for. I think sponsors are great when they present their products right, and if the right sponsor comes along, I am willing to work with them. Definitely when we had our user group in a physical location, we did have some really good sponsors, but I think being online, you eliminate a lot of the cost. So then you just look for a sponsor to help pay for the platform that you're on. So my employer, 2 Point Software, sponsors the GoToMeeting platform for me. So you might be able to ask your employer to sponsor the platform for you, because it is a good opportunity for your employer to advertise that they have a very smart and capable employee who's out in the community helping people. Or you could find a sponsor at a conference like this and you could explain your mission, and they might be willing to invest and sponsor the platform for you for the entire year, or you might have to ask a few sponsors to split it. But it's a whole lot better than sponsoring the rooms and the food and the swag and things like that. I just think that this is a better way to do it. So all of that said, look for ways to contribute in the community. Don't worry if you don't think that you know enough, because everything that you do has value, and somebody is struggling with something very similar to you, and you need to get a nomination. So currently it's only MVPs and Microsoft employees who can make the nomination. So definitely get to know the MVPs that are in your space that you're contributing in, because then it's a lot easier to ask for that nomination when the time comes. Or sometimes MVPs will notice what you're doing and go ahead and talk to you and then nominate you, and then you have a profile to fill in. And it takes about 2 years, sometimes even 3 years to go through that process, because Microsoft wants to make sure that this isn't just a one and done, that you're just doing 50 contributions and you're never going to contribute again. There's also people who get nominated all over the world all the time. So that's another reason why it takes a little bit of time, because there's a lot of profiles to go through. But it's something that you shouldn't be discouraged in. If you're passionate about sharing, share anyway. Once you become an MVP, it's an amazing crowd to be in. You definitely get a lot more networking and knowledge sharing than you would get outside of being an MVP, but don't be discouraged if you've been trying for a while, because it does take some time, and just keep sharing with the community. So with that, I will say goodbye, and after lunch today, I'm going to go home to my family, and hopefully I'll see some of you at the MMS that's in May at the Mall of America next year. Otherwise, I'll see you guys online for another video. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye.